Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back.
So today we're going to be like way back in time, right? Like way back. We're talking about the ways early humans lived.
Really the foundations of, well, everything, isn't it?
Exactly. We've got this super interesting excerpt we're going to be looking at today, and it talks about two really different ways of life, foraging and farming. So that's our mission today, to dive into the pros and cons of each and figure out, like, why was this shift from one to the other such a big deal in human history?
I mean, talk about a turning point.
Right. So first up, let's imagine ourselves as foragers.
All right, back to basics.
Okay, so get this. Humans were actually foragers for, like, way longer than they've been farming.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? We're talking almost 240,000 years.
240,000 years. That's, like, crazy to think about.
It really puts things in perspective.
For sure. So what did it actually mean to be a forager, though?
Well, picture this. You're living in a small group, basically your family, and you're constantly on the move.
Nomads.
Exactly. You're following the food, always searching for the next meal. The men would typically be out hunting, tracking animals and stuff, while the women would gather plants, nuts, berries, anything edible they could find.
Kind of like a never-ending camping trip.
Haha, in a way, yeah. But, with a lot more survival skills involved. And what's interesting is these hunter-gatherer groups were actually incredibly efficient. They only needed to work like 4 to 6 hours a day to get everything they needed.
Wow, talk about work-life balance.
Right. Plus, think about their diet. Super diverse, tons of fresh fruits and veggies, lean protein from the hunt. They were getting a ton of exercise just as part of their daily life.
Sounds pretty healthy.
Definitely. And there's another interesting aspect to this lifestyle. It tended to be more egalitarian.
Meaning?
Well, in those small family-based groups, there wasn't as much of a hierarchy, like we see later with farming societies.
So everyone's kind of on a more equal footing.
More or less, yeah. It wasn't a utopia or anything, but, things were pretty balanced overall.
But it couldn't have been all easy, right? Like, I'm sure there were some downsides to constantly being on the move.
Oh, absolutely. Foraging wasn't without its challenges. Imagine having to pack up your entire life every time the food ran out. And you're carrying everything you own, including babies and toddlers.
Yikes.
Yeah, not exactly convenient, right? And because of this need for mobility, these nomadic groups couldn't grow very large. It was all about staying small and agile.
Makes sense. So no sprawling forager cities.
Haha, not quite. And then there's the harsh reality that, lifespans were shorter back then.
Oh, right. Disease, accident.
Exactly. And sometimes groups had to make really tough decisions, like what happens when someone gets sick or elderly and can't keep up with the constant migration.
That must have been incredibly hard.
It was. And of course, there were always dangers from wild animals, rival groups. It was a precarious existence.
Wow, those early humans were definitely tough.
Incredibly resilient. But then things started to change. Humans discovered a whole new way to live: farming.
The game changer.
Exactly. Suddenly it was possible to settle down in one place and, grow your own food. No more chasing resources all over the map.
I can imagine that was a huge relief.
It was. And think about all the possibilities that opened up. You could build permanent homes, accumulate possessions, create a real sense of community. It was the dawn of a whole new era.
Like stepping into a whole new world.
Exactly. And farming came with a wave of advantages. People could grow more food than they needed, which meant they could store it for lean times. More babies survived infancy because they weren't being carried long distances.
Food security and better chances of survival.
Exactly. And as communities grew larger, we start to see something new: specialized jobs.
So not everyone had to be a farmer.
Right. Some people could focus on making tools, building houses, creating art. This led to more complex social structures and eventually even things like writing and the very first cities.
Wow. So farming really laid the groundwork for civilization as we know it.
It's amazing, right?
But I'm guessing it wasn't all sunshine and roses, even with all this progress. Were there downsides to farming, too?
Oh, for sure. While farming brought a lot of benefits, it also came with its own set of challenges. For one thing, it was hard work. Instead of those 4 to 6 hour workdays for foragers, farmers were putting in closer to 8 or 9 hours a day.
8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Right. A modern workday. And it wasn't just longer hours, it was physically demanding labor.
And I bet their diet wasn't as diverse anymore either.
You got it. Farmers tended to rely heavily on the crops they were growing, so their diet became less varied. And with larger populations living in close quarters, diseases could spread more easily.
Oh, right. Close contact, sanitation issues.
Exactly. These were challenges that nomadic foragers didn't really have to deal with.
So more people, but also more health risks.
Unfortunately, yes. And there's another big shift that happened with farming: the rise of social hierarchies.
Hierarchies.
Yeah, like different levels of power and status. With land ownership, control of resources, and specialized roles, inequality started to emerge.
So not everyone was equal anymore.
Not really, no. Some people had more power and wealth than others, which led to new social dynamics and sometimes even conflict.
It's fascinating to see how this one shift from foraging to farming has such ripple effects across society. It's like a chain reaction.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that neither way of life was inherently better. They both had their advantages and disadvantages, their joys and their challenges.
All about trade-offs, isn't it?
Exactly. So, thinking about what we've learned today, which lifestyle sounds more appealing to you? And what does that say about your own values?
It's a great question to consider. After all, this transition from foraging to farming wasn't just about changing how people lived. It fundamentally reshaped human society and set the stage for everything that came after.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought to ponder. Imagine you could combine elements of both foraging and farming to create your ideal society. What would that look like? What would you prioritize from each lifestyle?
What would the perfect blend be? Something to think about.
Absolutely. It's amazing how these ancient ways of life can still give us insights into the challenges we face today, and maybe even inspire solutions for a better future. Keep exploring and keep those questions brewing.
Until next time.
See ya.